God, there are moments when it feels like nothing is working, when no matter how much I try to move forward, things don't come together, doors don't open, and inside of me, a quiet frustration begins to build, one that I don't always say out loud, but I feel it. Your word says in Proverbs 3:5 to trust in you with all my heart and to lean not on my own understanding. But there are days when my understanding wants to take control, when I want answers, when I want to see progress, when I want things to make sense, and when they don't, it becomes harder to stay still and trust. And you also say in Isaiah 55:8 that your thoughts are not my thoughts, and your ways are not my ways. And even knowing that, I struggle when the path is unclear, when what I'm doing doesn't seem to produce results, and when I can't see where this is leading. But today, I recognize that the struggle is not only in what is happening around me, but in what is happening within me, that tension between wanting to trust you fully and still wanting to understand everything. So if you feel this too, if you've been trying, but things don't seem to move, if frustration has been building quietly inside of you, and trusting God feels harder than it should, stay here for a moment and pray this with me. God, as I come before you today, I bring this weight that I have been carrying, not just in my circumstances, but in my thoughts, in my expectations, and in the way I have been trying to make sense of everything that is not going the way I planned. Because I realize now that part of my frustration comes from holding on too tightly to how I thought things should unfold. Your word says in Jeremiah 29:11 that you know the plans you have for me, plans to prosper me and not to harm me, plans to give me a future and a hope. And I want to believe that fully, not just when things are going well, but especially in moments like this, when I don't see the results, when I don't understand the process, and when everything feels uncertain. There are moments when I begin to question if I am on the right path, when I wonder if I am doing something wrong, or if I missed something along the way. Because when things don't work out, it is easy for my mind to start creating doubt, to start looking for reasons, and to start losing the confidence I once had. But your word also says in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for good for those who love you and are called according to your purpose. And that reminds me that even when I don't see it, even when it doesn't feel like it, you are still working in ways that I cannot fully understand yet. Help me release the need to control every outcome. Help me let go of the pressure to figure everything out on my own. And help me trust that what you are doing in my life is not limited by what I can currently see, because I understand that my perspective is limited, but your purpose is not. There are things that I wanted to happen by now, things I thought would be different, and expectations that I quietly carried. And when those expectations are not met, it creates disappointment that slowly turns into frustration. And I don't want that frustration to turn into doubt in you. Instead, I choose to come back to your truth, to remind myself that delay is not denial, that silence does not mean absence, and that just because I don't see immediate results does not mean that nothing is happening, because you are always working, even in ways that I cannot perceive. Your word says in Psalm 37:5 to commit my way to you, to trust in you, and that you will act. And today I choose to do that, not halfway, not conditionally, but fully, placing what I do not understand into your hands and releasing the burden of trying to control what is beyond me. As I continue through this day, help me remain grounded in your truth, not in my emotions, not in my frustration, and not in what I can or cannot see, but in the certainty that you are still leading, still working, and still present in every part of my life, even when nothing seems to be moving. And even in this moment, I choose to trust you, not because I have all the answers, but because I know that you do. Lord, in this place where I cannot clearly see what is changing and where my effort does not seem to reflect immediate results, I begin to understand how much I have been depending on visible confirmation to feel secure, as if peace could only exist when everything around me makes sense. And I recognize that this way of thinking has kept me tied to what I can measure instead of what you have already spoken. Your word teaches in Habakkuk 2:3 that the vision awaits its appointed time, that it speaks of the end and will not prove false. And though it lingers, I am called to wait for it, because it will surely come and will not delay beyond what you have established. And this reminds me that what feels slow to me is not outside of your timing, it is within it. I also remember what is written in Galatians 6:9, that I should not grow weary in doing good, because in due season I will reap if I do not give up. And I see how easily weariness has been trying to take hold of me, not always physically, but mentally, in the form of doubt, frustration, and the quiet question of whether what I am doing is actually leading somewhere. But your truth calls me to remain steady, not because I feel certain, but because you are faithful, and even when I cannot trace what you are doing, I can trust that nothing I place in your hands is wasted, and nothing done in obedience is without purpose. even when I do not immediately see the outcome. There are moments when I look at my situation and try to evaluate it based on what is visible. And when I do that, it becomes easy to feel like nothing is changing, like nothing is progressing, and like I am standing in the same place. But your word in 2 Kings 6 shows that there is always more happening than what my eyes can perceive. And just because I cannot see it does not mean that you are not actively working. I also recognize that part of my struggle has been trying to understand everything before I trust it, wanting clarity before obedience, wanting answers before surrender, and wanting assurance before movement. But your word does not call me to understand first. It calls me to trust first, and to walk forward knowing that understanding will come in time. In Proverbs 16:9 it says that a man plans his way, but you direct his steps. And I see now that even when my plans do not unfold the way I expected, that does not mean I am off track. It may mean that you are redirecting me in ways I cannot yet recognize, and that what feels like interruption may actually be alignment. There is also a part of me that struggles with waiting because I associate waiting with inactivity. But your word reveals that waiting is not a pause in purpose. It is a place where strength is built, where character is formed, and where trust becomes deeper. And I understand that this season is not empty. It is preparing me for what is ahead. Lord, help me release the pressure to evaluate everything based on immediate results. Help me let go of the need to constantly measure progress. And help me remain grounded in the truth that you are working even when I cannot see movement. Because I know that your work is not always visible in the moment, but it is always present. I choose not to let frustration take root in my heart. I choose not to allow doubt to shape my perspective. And I choose not to walk away from what you have placed in front of me just because I cannot yet see the outcome. Because I trust that what you are doing is not incomplete. It is simply unfolding in a way that requires patience and faith. And even here, in the middle of uncertainty, I choose to remain steady, to continue forward, and to trust that what you have begun will reach completion in the time and way that you have already determined. Because you are not limited by what I see, and you are not delayed by what I feel. I also come to terms with the fact that not everything that feels delayed is actually late, and not everything that feels uncertain is without direction. Because your word in Psalm 27:13 reminds me that I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, not in some distant future, but here, in this life, in this process, even when it is not yet visible to me. And I hold on to that promise as a reminder that what I cannot see now is not the full picture of what you are doing. So instead of letting my thoughts lead me into discouragement, I choose to remain anchored in what you have already said, trusting that your plans are not fragile, that your timing is not mistaken, and that your work in my life is not incomplete. And even when I do not understand the path, I will continue walking it with confidence, knowing that you are guiding every step, sustaining every moment, and bringing everything together in a way that will make sense in time. Father, in this place where I cannot clearly see what is shifting and where what I expected to happen has not yet taken form, I choose to bring my thoughts into alignment with your truth, instead of allowing them to be shaped by what I feel or by what appears in front of me, because I recognize that my perception is limited and easily influenced by what is visible, but your word stands firm beyond what I can measure or understand. Your word says in Isaiah 55:10-11 that as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so is your word that goes out from your mouth. It will not return empty, but will accomplish what you desire and achieve the purpose for which you sent it. And I hold on to that, knowing that what you have spoken over my life is not dependent on my timeline or my interpretation, but on your authority and your faithfulness to fulfill it in the exact way it was intended. I also reflect on what is written in Psalm 33:11, that the plans of the Lord stand firm forever, the purposes of his heart through all generations. And I begin to understand that what you have purposed is not fragile, it is not temporary, and it is not subject to change based on circumstances. And even when I cannot trace what is happening, I can trust that nothing is outside of your design, and nothing is moving without your awareness. There have been moments where I have looked at what is happening around me and tried to evaluate it based on results, based on progress, and based on what I expected to see by now. And when those things did not align, I allowed discouragement to take root, as if the absence of visible movement meant the absence of your work. But I recognize now that this way of thinking has been shaped more by my perspective than by your truth. Your word in 2 Corinthians 4:18 reminds me to fix my eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. And I begin to understand that what I have been focusing on has been the temporary, the visible, the measurable. And in doing that, I have overlooked the deeper work that you are doing beyond my sight. A work that is not dependent on immediate results, but on transformation, alignment, and purpose. There are things that you are forming within me that I cannot yet fully recognize. Areas where patience is being developed, where trust is being strengthened, and where my dependence on you is becoming deeper, not because everything is easy, but because everything is requiring me to lean on you in a way I have not done before. I also consider what is written in Romans 5:3-4, that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope, and I begin to see that this moment is not empty, it is not wasted, and it is not without meaning, even if it feels slow, even if it feels uncertain, and even if it feels like nothing is changing. Because what you are building is not only about outcomes, it is about who I am becoming through this process. And I realize that if everything worked the way I expected, I would remain dependent on results instead of becoming rooted in faith, and I would continue to measure your work based on what I can see instead of trusting what you have already spoken. Father, I release the need to constantly evaluate where I am based on visible progress. I release the pressure of trying to determine whether things are working according to my expectations. And I release the habit of allowing frustration to define how I see this moment. Because I understand that your work is not incomplete. It is simply unfolding in a way that requires trust, patience, and surrender. I choose to remain grounded in your word, to stay anchored in what you have already declared, and to move forward without demanding immediate confirmation, because I know that what you are doing is not dependent on my ability to see it, but on your faithfulness to complete it. And even here, where things feel unfinished and where answers are not yet clear, I choose to stand firm in the truth that you are still working, still leading, and still fulfilling your purpose in ways that I cannot yet fully perceive. And I trust that nothing you have spoken will fail, nothing you have started will be abandoned, and nothing placed in your hands will return without accomplishing what you have already determined. Lord, as I continue forward from this moment, I choose not to carry the same internal tension that I have been holding. I choose not to walk into the rest of this day with a mindset shaped by uncertainty or by the absence of visible results, because I understand now that the way I move matters. Not only what I do, but how I think, how I respond, and how I remain anchored in you even when nothing around me appears to confirm what I am believing for. Your word in Colossians 2:6-7 calls me to continue to live my life in you, rooted and built up in you, strengthened in the faith as I was taught, and overflowing with thankfulness. And I recognize that being rooted means I am not easily shaken by what I see or do not see. And being built up means that something is growing within me even when I cannot measure it externally. I also reflect on what is written in Psalm 112:7, that the one who trusts in the Lord will have no fear of bad news. Their heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord, and I realize that steadiness does not come from controlling circumstances. It comes from trusting you. And when my trust is anchored in you, I am no longer moved by every change, every delay, or every uncertainty. Because my confidence is not in outcomes, it is in your character. There have been moments where I allowed my thoughts to run ahead, creating scenarios, questioning outcomes, and trying to prepare for things that have not even happened. And in doing that, I created a sense of pressure that did not come from you, but from my own attempt to control what is not mine to control. Your word in Philippians 4:6-7 instructs me not to be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, to present my requests to you, and that the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard my heart and my mind in Christ Jesus. And I receive that peace now, not as a concept, but as a reality that settles within me, guarding my thoughts, steadying my emotions, and bringing a calm that does not depend on circumstances. I also take hold of what is written in Hebrews 13:5, where you promise that you will never leave me nor forsake me, and I recognize that I am not walking through this alone, not in confusion, not in delay, and not in uncertainty, because your presence is constant even when my understanding is not. And that truth allows me to move forward with confidence, not because I have all the answers, but because I know I am not navigating this by myself. I choose to walk through the rest of this day without revisiting the same doubts, without returning to the same patterns of overthinking, and without allowing my mind to create conclusions that are not rooted in your truth, because I understand that I have already placed this in your hands, and I am not taking it back. I will not keep analyzing what you have already received, and I will not keep questioning what I have already surrendered. As I continue, I move with clarity, I move with intention, and I move with a steady awareness that my steps are not random, they are being directed. And even when I cannot see the full path ahead, I trust that each step is aligned with what you are accomplishing. I will not rush ahead, and I will not hold back in fear. I will move forward with balance, grounded in your word and confident in your faithfulness. And in this moment, I remain anchored, I remain steady, and I remain fully confident that what you are doing is not incomplete, not delayed beyond your purpose, and not uncertain in its outcome. And I trust you completely in every part of this process, knowing that you are faithful to fulfill everything you have spoken. Amen.